Yevamos Daf Tzadei Aleph contains three primary sugyas. The daf begins with a few brief comments on our Mishnah, first Mishnah that we're analyzing, discussing what happens when a woman remarries and then her original husband comes back. The Gemara will then get into its first sugya, which is the three later opinions in the Mishnah, which argue on the Tanna Kama, do those three opinions agree with each other, and which one is saying the biggest chiddush. The Gemara's second sugya will be the last line in the Mishnah, which is when the woman remarries because she had two witnesses. Is that considered to be her fault? And does everybody agree to that? And is that the halacha? Then the Gemara will get into this third sugya, which is the broader concept of, do we say that there's an onus if someone did a wrong halacha based on a wrong situation? They could not have known that the halacha was wrong. Do we consider them to be an onus and not responsible for what happened? The last line will talk about whether or not we are concerned if there's rumors that the husband's alive, but we haven't actually seen him. Let's begin the Gemara. The Gemara is analyzing the Mishnah. So the first halacha that we're going to discuss here is that which it says in the Mishnah, that when her husband comes back and she remarried based on the testimony of one witness that he had died, so now she's puzzled from kahuna. She's not allowed to marry kohanim anymore. So Gemara asks, that's pashut? Of course. She has a din of a zona. She's nival to someone who she's asa to. She was an eshes ish. The Gemara says the chiddush is the second half of this Mishnah's line, which is that if she was a bas levi, she's puzzle for meiser. She can't eat a meiser anymore. So the Gemara says, what's taka pshat in that? Since when is there an isser eating meiser? We have a brisa that says that a levia, a bas levi, who is captured, and therefore we assume she was nival to the guy, or she had bias znus, she's allowed to eat meiser. The Gemara says that's generally the halacha. But here, there's a knas on her. Again, she remarried based on one witness's testimony. There's a knas. We penalize her for the fact that she put herself in this situation, and therefore she can't eat meiser either. Okay, next line in the Mishnah was that if she's a bas kohen, she can't eat truma anymore. The Gemara says that's pashut also. The chiddush is that even truma d'Rabbanan she's not allowed to eat. The next line in the Mishnah was that the inheritors don't inherit her. Her inheritors, her children, don't inherit a ksuba. So the Gemara says, what ksuba? There is no ksuba. Early in the Mishnah we said there's no ksuba. The Gemara says we're referring to something called ksubas benin dichrin, which is a special takana d'Rabbanan that they made for a woman who doesn't collect her ksuba. Now, generally a woman doesn't collect her ksuba if she dies before her husband's alive when she dies, therefore the husband doesn't give a ksuba. If that husband then goes ahead and marries a second wife, and then he dies, so there is a ksuba payment that goes to the children of the first wife. Even though the first wife never collected a ksuba, the children of the first wife do get their ksuba as part of an extra inheritance. They get the value that they would have gotten of that ksuba. That's a takana d'Rabbanan for the sake of the first wife's children. So here, even though she had her first, she was the first wife, and she didn't collect a ksuba because she wasn't supposed to be married to either of them. We have a knas. So you may think that there is still a ksuba payment that goes to the inheritors. And that's what the Mishnah is referring to when it says that they don't get their special ksuba. They don't get that ksubas binin dichron as part of an extra inheritance. They just get the same regular inheritance that everybody else does. Our next halacha in the Mishnah was that both husbands, the first one and the second one, have to do chalitza. Where it says the first husband has to do chalitza midaraisa. If she falls to yibum from the first husband, there is a real yibum because the first husband was really her husband. She was married to her. Deraisa, she should be able to do yibum. The rabbanan menatakana, no yibum, only chalitza. Second husband is not married to her at all because she was really married to the first husband when she married him. So midaraisa, she doesn't need anything, not yibum and not chalitza. Chiddush of the Mishnah is that there is a takana she should require chalitza, at least midarabanan, because people think she was divorced from her first husband and really married to the second husband. Alright, that's the Gemara's comments on it. Now the Gemara is going to go to the three secondary opinions in the Mishnah. So we had seen all the list of knasos from the Tanna Kama. What we'll see now is that there were three later opinions in the Mishnah which argued, and each one argued on a different prat. So the first opinion was that of Rabbi Yosi. He said that she has a right to her ksuba from her first husband. The next opinion was that of Rabbi Elazar, who said that the husband has a right to get her ma'aseh yadayim and her mitzvah, has a right to get her earnings and the things that she finds. And the third opinion was that of Rabbi Shimon, who said that she does get yibum from the first husband's brother. She falls to yibum from the first husband. So the Gemara wants to know these three halachos. Which one is the bigger chiddush? What's the order of chiddush? So the Gemara says it's a machlokes amraim. According to Rav Huna, each later Tana is saying a bigger chiddush, and he agrees to the Tanaim before him. According to Rav Yochanan, it's the reverse. So what's the reason? So the Gemara gives a svara why each one should be a bigger chiddush according to each Amira. So Rav Huna says the smallest chiddush is that of Rabbi Yosi, who says just that she receives her ksuba from the first husband. We don't take the ksuba away. So that's not such a big chiddush, because the potential concern here is we don't want her to get anything that's going to keep, that will keep her in the marriage. We want this marriage to dissolve because it's a marriage that's be'isr. She's also labal, also laboel. So the ksuba is part of the ending of the marriage process. It's not going to keep them together. That's what happens when they separate. So that's not such a big chiddush that she gets that. And everybody else agrees to that. Rabbi Elazar comes along afterwards. He adds another chiddush that she even gets to keep her ma'aseh yadayim, and she keeps her things that she finds. Now, that is a bigger chiddush, because that's something that she gets while they're in the marriage, and that tends to keep them together. But still, Rabbi Yosi holds that, Rabbi Elazar holds that she keeps that. And that is not as big a chiddush as to say that she falls to Yibam. Because falling to Yibam means that there's going to be a bia that's going to happen, and that bia would be a bia be'isser if she didn't really fall to Yibam. So that Rav Shimon goes a step further, and he says all those things are monetary. Okay, that's not such a big deal. There's no isser involved. He goes and actually he agrees to them all, Rav Shimon, and he says even the bia we don't knas, and we allow her to do the bia to the Yibum, to the husband, to the brother of her first husband if she falls to Yibum from him. Now Rav Yochanan reverses it. Rav Yochanan says each one is saying a lesser chiddush than the one before, and each one does not agree to what the one before said, but the one before agrees to what the later one says. So the biggest chiddush, according to him, is Rabbi Yosi, who said that she keeps her ksuba. And the reason that that's the biggest chiddush is because that's something that the husband gives her. That comes from the husband to her. So we would think that we would penalize her and take away some right that she gets. Here it's money that's coming to her, and we don't take that away from her. That's the biggest chiddush. Rabbi Elazar doesn't go that far. He says we're not going to let her keep things that are coming to her from him, but the ma'aseh yadayim and the mezonos and the mitzios that are going from her to him, so that we could let him get. Why should we penalize him? We penalized her. We didn't penalize him. He didn't do anything wrong. People thought he died. He didn't die. It's not his fault. So therefore, that's less of a chiddush to say that he still gets to keep the ma'aseh yadayim. And the least chiddush of all is that of Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon will not agree to either of the ones before him. And that's Reb Shimon, who says that there's the bia that she gets the right to do, and that's because that only happens until after he dies. So all these things that come before are things that are happening while he's still alive. And Rav Shimon would say we can ask them all according to this understanding. Only things that happen after he died, when this marriage was already over, so Rav Shimon says we're not going to knas anymore. What's the point in that? The husband's already dead and gone. This is between her and his brother, so that's the least chiddush, and the other ones before him would agree, but he wouldn't agree to them. Alright, now the Gemara goes on to discuss the next line in the Mishnah, which appears right after Reb Shimon has his opinion. And this goes on to what happens if she didn't remarry based on one witness, which is what we said so far, but she remarried based on two witnesses. Two witnesses came. This is what's called Al-Pi Eidim. The first thing is called Al-Pi Bezdin, because the Bezdin are the ones who said that she could believe two witnesses, although they did put the responsibility to make sure that it's true on her. So here she has two Eidim. So the Mishnah says she has two Eidim. None of these can also supply, because the seeming understanding is that she was an onus. Two Eidim is considered to be 100% foolproof. So Gemara says that Rav Huna, and the name of Rav, this is the halacha. This line is taka halacha. So Gemara says, what did he say that for? And what did he say in this way? What did he say? This is the halacha. When I say the halacha is like Reb Shimon, this comes right after Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon said this. So let him say the halacha is like Reb Shimon. So the Gemara uses as an expression, why are you stealing? Why are you hiding like a thief? You're saying this is the halacha, you're not saying who you're passing like. Say it, pass like Reb Shimon. So Gemara says, maybe you didn't want to pass like Reb Shimon because then people would think that the first halacha of Reb Shimon, in the first case where she got remarried based on one witness, and Reb Shimon said she can still do yibum, the first husband's brother, that Rav agrees to that also. So Gemara says, that's what you're concerned about to say. The halacha is like Reb Shimon in the latter halacha. Gemara leaves this as a kasha. The Gemara doesn't have an answer for it. So then the Gemara, though, starts up with this Alpi halacha. The Gemara says that the problem is this, the implication here, when Rav says that this is the halacha, is that it's only Reb Shimon holds this way, and the Rabbanan argue. So Rav Shesha says it can't be that the Rabbanan argue. First of all, Svar, second of all, we have a Brisa. Svar is, how could they argue? There was nothing she could do. She's an Einus. Why should she get any knas at all? The Gemara doesn't address that now. The Gemara will address that later. And at first the Gemara wants to bring a Brisa, and it actually comes with another support on Brisa to show that the Rabbanan also agree that in the case of two Adam, she's an Einus and she has nothing she could have done and she doesn't get any knasos. So the Gemara is going to bring a Brisa which seems to indicate that she doesn't get any knasos. And then the Gemara has to prove that this is the Rabbanan and not Reb Shimon. We know Reb Shimon holds the way. So the Brisa says any erva, any iser ervo, any marriage which is kares does not require a get. There's no tfisas kedushin, no divorce is required. It's meaningless. The exception to that is a woman who remarries when she is still married to her first husband. She didn't realize, based on the psak of the Beis Din, meaning based on one witness. So the Gemara says there's a clear implication there that only in the case of one witness do we require a get, which is one of the knasos d'Rabbanan which we said in the Mishnah, which would imply that the Mishnah applies there. The clear implication is only as if it's al pi Beis Din, but if it's with two witnesses, so you don't need the Beis Din, so then there's no knas, there's no get, and everything else that says in the Mishnah would not apply. So this says this last halacha that we said here. Now this could be Reb Shimon talking. It says the Gemara, I'm going to prove to you that it's not Reb Shimon, and it can't be Reb Shimon for the simple reason that Reb Shimon would say is that even in the case of an eid echad, you don't require a get. Even though our Mishnah wasn't clear that way, but the Gemara says Reb Shimon holds the way. He holds even in the case of an eid echad, which is nisis al pi Beis Din, does not require a get. This Mishnah said otherwise, therefore it must be the Rabbanan. Where do you see that the Rabbanan? Where do you see that Reb Shimon holds that nisis al pi eid echad, if it was based on one witness, she would also not require a get? So the Gemara brings a brisa. Reb Shimon says, it's clearly quoting Reb Shimon. It says that the Beis Din made on their psak, which is when a woman gets remarried based on one witness, they made it like she did. She was an eshes ish that was mezaneh b'mezid, like a zodon. That's as if it was b'mezid. And if she remarries based on two witnesses, they made that like an eshes ish b'shogeg, like it was a mistake. So the Gemara says, so Reb Shimon is saying, if it's one aid, then it's considered a mezid. If it's two aid, then it's considered to be a shogeg. Either way, the implication should be she does not require a get. Either way, she remarried as an eshes ish, she shouldn't require a get. There's no tfisas kedushin. She doesn't require a get. He's calling one eshes ish marrying someone b'shogeg and one eshes ish marrying someone b'mezid. Either way, there's no get. So you see, Reb Shimon holds that neither one require a get. Therefore, the brisa that says that in the case of two Adam she doesn't require a get must be the Rabbanan. And therefore, you see that the Rabbanan they agree to this halacha, and therefore Rav doesn't make sense that he's paskening, the halacha is like Reb Shimon. No one argues. So the Gemara is going to give four answers to this. The first three are going to push off the proof from the second brisa that Reb Shimon holds you don't need to get, even in the case of nises al pi echad, when there's only one witness. Based on that, once we show that Reb Shimon is not necessarily holding that way, then this brisa that we brought could be Reb Shimon, and therefore we have no proof what the Rabbanan hold, and we don't know that they agree. So what are the three ways to learn this brisa that it's not saying that when she marries on one witness, she still does not require a get? So the Gemara's first approach is to say what we said, that's considered to be a shogeg. That's considered to be a mezid, and when it's two witnesses, it's considered to be a shogeg we weren't saying that it's really an Ashes Ish marrying B'mezid and B'shogeg. We're saying it's like the Bia is like a Mezid and a Shogeg. It's like a man trying to marry a woman B'mezid and B'shogeg. One did a Bia L'Shem Kedushin, that would be a Mezid. And one's like where they did a Bia not L'Shem Kedushin, that would be like where it was B'shogeg. It meant Kavana and not Kavana. And that's what we mean to say by Mezid and Shogeg. We're not saying that it's like a din of Ashes Ish. We're not focusing on the Ashes Ish here. We're just focusing on the fact that we consider one to be Kavana, one to be not Kavana, and we could be referring to even if it wasn't an Ashes Ish. Now, the Gemara's second approach is to say that we weren't talking about the halacha of whether they require a get or not. We're talking about whether it's Tfisas Kiddushin. We were talking about the halacha of the Isser. Is there now an Isser of Asur Labal, Asur Labal? Do we consider it to be a BS Znus or not? So if it's a Shogeg, so then she's not also to her husband, it's a BS Znus B'Shogeg. And that's what we're referring to when it was 2 Eidim. If it's B'mezid, that's when there was only 1 Eid, then she is also to her husband. But just talking about Isser to the husband, we're not talking about whether or not she requires a get from the second man or not. Gemara's third approach is to say that we're not talking about, similar to the second approach, we're not talking about whether it's considered to be Ashes Ish, and therefore she requires a get or not. We're talking about whether she needs to bring a carbon. A Shogeg needs to bring a carbon. A Mezid does not need to bring a carbon. So we're saying that the case of the Nisis Api 8 Echad, that's Haras Bezdin, she doesn't require a carbon. The halacha is Haras Bezdin never requires a carbon. That's a specific halacha. And if she's Nises Api Shnaim Eidim, then she does require, then she's considered to be like a Shogeg, and she is required to bring a carbon because of the Isser Kares that she did B'Shogeg. Now, these are the Gemara's first 3 approaches. These all say that Reb Shimon really is the author of the Brisa. The Gemara's second approach is to say, this is the fourth approach, but the second style here is to say that Reb Shimon is not the one who is the author of the Brisa. The Brisa is really the Rabbanon. If so, this should be a clear proof that the Rabbanon do agree that in the case of 2 Eidim, she's not held responsible and she doesn't get Kanasos. So the Gemara says, no, we just have to stick one letter into the Brisa. When it said that the exception to the rule that an Erva does not require a get, the exception is an Ashes Ish, we phrase it as follows. The except for an Ashes who remarried Alpi Beis, and that's Eid Echad, and an Ashes Ish that remarried Alpi 2 Eidim. We just stick in the Vav there, and it's and. Therefore, it's referring to both of them, and that's how we understand it. And the Chachamim, therefore, are saying that both, whereas 1 Eid and 2 Eidim, she does require a get, and we do hold her responsible. We do have Kanasos against her. And now the Gemara is going to deal with the general concept that she's an ones. The Gemara is going to bring 5 or 6 proofs that we don't say that she doesn't get a knas because she's an ones. We show we do apply kanasos even when there's really seemingly nothing we should have known. In each of these, the Gemara is going to say, no, there is something we should have known. So we're going to have a list of 6 different cases where we apply a knas to a woman who remarried based on a wrong psak. She wasn't allowed to. And we're going to say, therefore, it proves that because we're giving her a knas and she was an ones, that we do hold her responsible, even though she's an ones. And where's the answer going to be? It's not an ones. Most of these, the answer will be she should have, that there's a psul on her get. She should have shown her get to a chacham to make sure that it's okay. So the Gemara's first case, and this is asked by Ula. The Gemara's first question is where the get was written wrongly. It was written based on the time, the year given on the get was based on the wrong kingdom. It was either using the Roman king, which the Gemara calls Machal She'eno Hogenes. Rashi explains it's called Machal She'eno Hogenes because they don't have a language, they don't have their own script. So either that, or it's written on the dates of the Greek king, or the date of the building of the Beis HaMikdash, the date of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. It was written in the wrong place. It says east when it was west, west when it was east. Either way, any of these psulim in the writing of the get's puzzle, and she remarried based on that. She has to leave both husbands because she's, again, the same situation. She thought she was divorced and she wasn't. And all the knesses apply. So the Gemara says, what did she do? It's not her fault. What does she know? She doesn't even know how to read, probably. So Gemara says she should have brought the get to a chacham before she remarried based on it to make sure that it's okay. Therefore, she's not an onus. But if she would be a real onus, she wouldn't get these knossos. Whereas second kasha is Rav Simi Barashi. He talks about the case where you have an Isser Yevamo L'Shuk, and he's quoting a brisa which is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva holds that Yevamo L'Shuk is considered to be the same as an Isser Kares. It's not, it's an Isser Lav, but has the same Issurim as Kares, and therefore there should be no Tfisas Kedushin, and you have all these Issurim. This case, the Yevamo L'Shuk, she thought she was free to go to the Shuk because her Tzara got Yibam. So when a tzar gets Yibam, she is totally scot-free. The problem is that the tzar turned out to be an islandess. And therefore she wasn't in the parsha of Yibam at all, and she's still in Yibam. So now, retroactively, she had a problem. So she gets knossos. Where says, well, what was she supposed to know? Was she supposed to know that the tzara was an islandess? The Gemara answers, she should have waited. She should have waited to make sure that she's definitely going to show signs of maturity and that she won't be an islandess. As long as there's a possibility of islandess, you're responsible to stick around. Second, the third kash is very similar. This is Abai. This is also a woman who went to Shuk because she thought she was Pater, and that's because she was a Tzaras Erva. Tzaras Erva, we know if two women are falling to Yibam from the same husband, one of them is an Erva to the Yavam. The other one's free as well. But here, the Tzaras Erva turned out to be the Tzara turned out to be an islandess. The Erva turned out to be an islandess, which means that her whole marriage was a Mekach Tois. She was never married, and the two of them were not Tzaros in the first place. And therefore, the one who went L'Shuk was really the only Yevama, and she's Yevama L'Shuk now. Same problem. The Gemara says how she's supposed to know, and again, the Gemara says she should have waited. Fourth kash is Rava. He also goes back to Psulim in the get. Here he says an interesting case. He quotes a brisa where generally when a get happens, so a sofer writes two documents. He writes the get, he gives it to the husband, which he's going to give to his wife to divorce her. And he writes a receipt, which he gives to the woman, which she's going to give to her husband when she receives her ksuba. He wrote both of them, but he switched it. And he gave the get to the woman, he gave the receipt to the husband. Neither of them read it, neither of them looked at it. They both gave each other the document that they had. Turns out she gave him a get, and he gave her a receipt. So she's not divorced. She thinks she is. And she goes and she remarries, and later she finds out that she never got a get, she got a receipt. She gave a get. So now what she's supposed to do? So the halacha is, again, she's penalized. All these knossos apply. Gemara says, what was she supposed to do? It's not her fault. Gemara says she should have brought the get to a chacham and make sure that it was correct. Should have looked at it. Fifth kash is Rav Ashi, who says if his name or her name or the name of the city is wrong, it's also a psol, and the same halachos apply. All the knossos apply. Again, what should she have done? She should have showed it to a chacham. And the last one is where there's something called a get kireach, a bold get. The get is sometimes given open, sometimes it's folded and tied after every fold and signed on the back of the fold. So if there are more folds and signatures, the get is puzzle. It's called a get kireach. And again, it's puzzle. How should she have known? She should have shown it to a chacham. Okay, now the Gemara discusses whether or not we can actually paskin this. If a woman gets remarried based on two edim, and then her husband comes back, can you let her go back to her first husband? Do we say that she's an onus or not? Our Mishnah seems to say, Kos Rishonim says that she is. Rav said that's the halacha. So the Gemara says that Rav Papa wanted to paskin this way. A case came before him, and he wanted to let her go back to her first husband. So the Gemara says that Rav Huna Beit of Yeshua said, how could you do that? We had all these kashas. We asked 6 kashas, which all proved we don't say this halacha. We don't say that she's an onus. What should she have done? So Gemara says, what do you mean? We had 6 questions. We had an answer for all of them. So the Gemara says, because you had an answer, you're going to do a halacha l'maisa? We pushed away the question. That doesn't mean that the question's answered. It just means we had a push off. Not necessarily, though, is that take away the fact that the question is strong, and then we shouldn't do this halacha. Right now the Gemara brings one more halacha here. The Gemara says, Rav Ashi says, what we saw in the Mishnah was that if the husband comes back, now we can ask her. So that's not true if there's just rumors that he's alive. If we then get a persistent rumor that he's alive, generally we take those things very seriously. But here in this case, it doesn't say that. It says only if he comes back do we have a problem, we have to knas her. So Gemara says, what's Rav Ashi's chiddush? If he's talking about after she remarried the second husband, then you get this persistent rumor that the first husband is alive. So what's the chiddush of that? Rav Ashi already said that halacha before. He said any rumor which comes up after a marriage, such as, for example, if a Kohen marries a woman and then there's a persistent rumor that she was a grusha. So you don't listen to rumors. Once the marriage has already happened, you don't listen to the rumors. So the Gemara says, no, Rav Ashi's chiddush over here is as follows. Since the Beis Din is required to get involved. She needed to go to the Beis Din to give her a psak, to give her a heter to get remarried. This is referring to the case where she got remarried up P8 Echad, and that's where all the knossos apply. So since she had to go to the Beis Din, and obviously they chose that there was some suspicion that the husband was alive, therefore when the rumors start, that may be a reinvigoration of the earlier suspicion. So you may say that this counts as if the rumors were always there before she got married. Because hare, she came for a heter. That means that there was some concern. So this harkens back to that and connects to that. When we get the rumors now, it's a really continuation of the previous episode, the previous uncertainty. Whereas no, we don't view it that way. We view that was an uncertainty because we didn't know what happened to him. And now is when the rumors begin, and they begin after she's remarried, and therefore it doesn't count as a rumor that starts before she's remarried, and we ignore it.